This Davante Adams thing, Shireen, still hovers over the National Football League. It hovers over the Raiders. I don't know where he's going to go, but I know this. For every week that he's there, the Raiders are cutting him a check for $983,000. Mark Davis would rather not do that. At some point, they got to decide, do we stop the financial bleeding and take what we can get, or do we continue to hold out for more than what we've been offered? At some point, they're going to have to make that decision, and if they wait through 4 more weekends, they're going to be out almost another $4 million.
There is no doubt, Mike, that they want to do this sooner than later, just for the simple reason that you said they're paying him money. And also, as Antonio Pierce said, that hamstring is getting better. So he's about ready to play. So then that creates, is Davante actually going to play for him? What are you going to do with him if he doesn't want to play for you? If he wants to protect himself, protect that hamstring until he gets traded, which I could understand him wanting to do that. So you have all sorts of dynamics here going on that says this needs to happen, and it needs to happen fairly quickly. You would think it would happen on a Monday or a Tuesday early in the week so that the other team doesn't have to pay him that $1 million for that week that he's not going to play. They want to get him in there and get him playing. So you would have to think that the deadline is early in a week to get him on your roster, get him ready, at least be a limited player for you on that Sunday the next week. But this has got to happen.
Yeah, you're right about the timing. You want to have maximum opportunity to get him ready to go if you're going to be taking on his salary. Now, the other side of it, to get what the Raiders want, and they still want, some are reporting a package that includes a second-round pick. I believe, based upon the things I've heard, that a second-round pick would do it. That other stuff is something the Raiders would quickly abandon if they could get someone to offer them a second-round pick. They haven't even gotten there yet. And there's a thought they're not going to get a second-round pick unless, Shireen, they agree to pay a large chunk of the remaining salary that's due at $983,000 a week. You could drop his salary all the way down to the minimum, trade that prorated minimum, obviously at this point, pay him the rest. That gets you a better trade package because you aren't just getting the player, you're getting a better deal from a cash and cap standpoint, or they're going to have to send picks with him. Davante Adams and a 5, Davante Adams and a 4. That's how you're going to get a 2 if you're determined to come out of this with a second-round pick. They're going to have to be creative and they're going to have to be flexible because the leverage that any interested team has, Shireen, is to just say, fine, pay him another game check, and we'll do this again next week.
Yeah, and it's like that with any player, Mike, with a high salary. The more money that the team takes on that's trading him, the better the package is going to be. The Raiders have the cap room. So this makes no sense to me that they don't want to take on some of this. I would take on as much as I possibly could afford to get the better picks, to get the better package for him, whatever they can get. It's going to be better the more money they take on. So that's what they want. They shouldn't care about the salary cap this year. They've got plenty of room. What you want is to build a team. And to build a team, you need as much as you can get from Davante Adams, who, by the way, cost you a first-round pick and a second-round pick for 3 years.
And the other reality, too, is he's in his final year with the Raiders. I know he's got 2 years left under contract, but that contract was negotiated to have a significant jump in the salary in 25 and 26, $35.64 million each year. That got the average to 28. The real average of his deal was 3 years, 22.9. The phony baloney back-end years got it to 28. Those years are going to be torn up. So you're looking at cutting him after the year, getting nothing for him when you cut him. You only get compensatory draft picks when you have players leave via the normal free agency process with their contract expiring. If you cut him, you get nothing. If you fail to trade him before the deadline, you get nothing. All you can do after the trade deadline is cut him and hope somebody claims his contract on waivers so you don't have to pay him for the rest of the year. So the clock is ticking. 3 weeks and 5 days to go before that window shuts. They'd be crazy not to trade him. And the one factor that we need to keep in mind, and this is the Carson Palmer factor. We'll go back to 2011. Carson Palmer was done with the Bengals. And Mike Brown, his attitude was, sit on your couch and eat pork rinds for all I care. I'm not cutting you. I'm not trading you unless I get what I want. And no one was offering Mike Brown what he wanted. 2 days before the trade deadline, Raiders quarterback Jason Campbell breaks a collarbone. All of a sudden, Mike Brown got what he wanted. So, and I'm not going to name names. Pick a number one receiver with a contending team. I won't name names for fear of being accused of putting the jinx on them. If you get a number one receiver, Charean, who suffers a season-ending injury this week, next week, the next week, or the next week, all of a sudden, Raiders are getting a second-round pick. All of a sudden, Raiders don't have to pay any of the salary. All of a sudden, Raiders might even get more than a second-round pick. So that's part of this analysis. Circumstances can change dramatically beyond the teams that are talking to the Raiders. And at last word, Jets, Saints, Steelers, with the Bills monitoring the situation. You take away another team's number one receiver on a contending team, that's how the Raiders get what they want. And that's how kind of the clouds part, because maybe Adams sees, hey, going to that contending team as the instant number one receiver is a better option for me than any of these teams that are currently looking at me.
Well, and you look at how much receivers get hurt. We just saw it with Nico Collins. Now, the Texans are loaded at receiver, so they're set at receiver. So I'm not saying the Texans are going after Davante Adams, but it happens. And even hamstrings, as we saw with Davante, as we're seeing with Nico Collins, can keep you out for weeks. And if you're a contending team and you don't have a good core of receivers, if you just have that number one guy, say a Dallas with the CD Lamb, then you're going to go after Davante if you have an injury and you think you can contend this year. He is that guy, Mike, that can put you over the top potentially if that's what you're missing. And that's why I look like at a team like the Bills, who I think have the parts to win a Super Bowl, but I don't like the receiving core at all. And if you add Davante Adams to that receiving core, suddenly I like the receiving core. And I like those other guys with Davante Adams much, much more. So that's a team I think that he can really make a difference on. And there are teams out there he can really make a difference on that have a chance to contend this year. So that's what you're looking for, is either a team with an injury that thinks it contend, that needs him, or a team like the Bills that could really use him.
The Bills have always resisted the in-season all-in moves. They'll make some off-season moves, but in-season, when opportunities arise, and I remember back in 2021 when the Rams made the trade for Von Miller, when the Rams made the move to get Odell Beckham Jr., I remember saying, you know what, if the Bills had acquired those two players, maybe they would have won the Super Bowl that year, because those two players became key ingredients in what the Rams ultimately did. The Bills don't do that. And, you know, Charean, I think the other challenge here for the Bills, when you trade Stephon Diggs and then you tell the world repeatedly, we don't need a number one receiver, we don't need a number one receiver, it's good that we don't have a number one receiver, oh, well, we're going to trade for a number one receiver. You got to be willing to come up with a way, and this is where the PR people earn their money. You got to come up with a way to thread that needle and say, all that stuff that we said about not needing a number one receiver, pay no attention. We have an opportunity to get a number one receiver, and we're going to go get him, and we did it, and here we are. And if it dusts off the Stephon Diggs conversation, so be it. It's about making your team better. And also, if he's going to go to the Jets and make the Jets better, you get even more of a net positive. You've kept the Jets from getting him, and you've gotten him. So that's all the more reason for the Bills to be doing more than monitoring the situation.
Well, I remember, speaking of which, back when the Cowboys decided that we don't need a number one receiver. We're going to have a receiver by committee. Mid-season, they go out and they trade for Amari Cooper, and they gave up a first-round draft pick to get Amari Cooper. And they were right. They needed a number one receiver. I think the Bills are in the same position, regardless. Jason, they need a number one receiver. He could be that guy. He could help them. But you're right. It's just not something that's in their DNA. It's not something that they have done before. And maybe that's why they haven't gotten to a Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl, Mike. Maybe this is the guy they need to do that, to get them over the hump. It's obviously the best team in that division. That division has not been what we thought it was going to be, a lot because of the Tua Tagovailoa injury, and the Jets just haven't been that team yet. They're going to win that division, but is that enough? You've done that. You're trying to get further than that, and I think Davante Adams can get them further than that.
Jason Garrett tells a great story about the Amari Cooper trade. Will McClay came to him, and they're talking about possibilities of trading for a receiver. And I don't think Jason was all that interested until Will McClay mentioned Amari Cooper, and it's like you can get Amari Cooper. And, oh, by the way, that was a Raiders receiver at the time that the Raiders decided to move on from. And now they're moving on from Davante Adams. It's more Davante Adams is moving on from the Raiders. Either way, I'll be stunned to see him ever on a practice field or in uniform for the Raiders again. I fully expect him to be traded. The question is where, when, and how much will they get for him and how much of his salary will they have to pay. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.